When the smoke of World War II cleared, a new race began. America's answer? The M41 Walker Bulldog. Fast, fierce, and ready for the Cold War. Light on armor, heavy on attitude. Armed with a 76mm high-velocity gun and a top speed of 45 miles per hour. We'll show you how it works, and at the end, we're taking this tank for a drive. At the end of World War II, nations could finally take a break from the bloodshed to clean up the pieces of a broken world. This was also a time to look back on the war to analyze what happened, what went wrong, and what could be improved. Naturally, this also meant building new weapons based off of lessons learned from just a few years ago. Because despite the momentary peace, it looked like the US would go to war again in the not-so-distant future against the Soviets. To prepare itself for the seemingly inevitable conflict, the US started designing new weapons and vehicles that would have a better chance against their Soviet counterparts than what was in the World War II inventory. One of the main things the US wanted was more new tanks. New heavy tanks, new medium tanks, and new light tanks. Now, the light tank that the US had ended the war with, the M24 Chaffee, was not a bad tank at all. In fact, it was a very good tank. However, against a swarm of well-armored Soviet tanks, the Chaffee and its 75mm gun would not fare so well. So the Army started plans for a light tank that would have a high-velocity gun, good top speed, good range, and could be air transportable. And this is what they came up with. This is the M41 Walker Bulldog light tank, armed with a high-velocity 76mm gun. It was originally called the Little Bulldog. The name was changed to the Walker Bulldog after General Walker was killed in Korea. Production of the vehicle started in 1951 and ran until 1954 with just over 3,729 vehicles being produced by Cadillac. Now, the Walker Bulldog, or officially the 76mm gun tank M41, entered service in 1953. Too late to see action in Korea, but would see plenty of action in the coming years, just not in the way that the US military had envisioned. Unfortunately, the Walker weighed more than intended, just over 26 tons, which meant that it cannot be air transportable. This hampered the ability to rapidly deploy it in a reactionary force for a situation in which a country like, say, Korea or French Indochina was invaded. Despite the weight, the vehicle had no problems joining the ranks of over 20 countries. West Germany would even equip it as the first tank of the modern Bundeswehr, calling it the LE-KPZ-41. And we're going to keep them in mind. The first combat debut of the Walker was in 1961 during the Bay of Pigs invasions, where counter-revolutionary Cuban Brigade 2506 used 5 Walker Bulldogs, supplied by our friends at the CIA of course, to rip across the Cuban countryside, wreaking havoc and destroying Cuban tanks before they could run out of ammunition and fuel. The tanks were abandoned after the Bay of Pigs failure, and despite my calls to the embassy, I'm still not sure if the Cuban government is willing to donate one to me. Anyways, the M41 Walker Bulldog would then go to Southeast Asia, where the South Vietnamese Army, or the ARVN, would use them to great extent during the Vietnam War. Now, the Walker Bulldog's use in Vietnam deserves its own video, but for now, I want to focus on this Walker because I think it'd be fun to show you the inside of one, and maybe even how to drive it. It should be noted that there were multiple variants of the M41, such as the M41A1, the M41A2, and the M41A3. However, since both Walker Bulldogs we have here at the museum are the standard M41s, then we'll be focusing on this one, which is the standard version of the Walker. With that being said, let's dive into it, starting at the front with the muzzle brake. Alright, so starting with the exterior of the Walker, starting at the front with the T muzzle brake, this does a very good job of dispersing flame out to either side when the main gun goes off. Then right behind that is your bore evacuator, which helps keep a lot of those toxic fumes out of the inside of the turret. It dispels them after the round goes out the barrel. And then up front with the glacis plate, it is 1 inch thick, sloped at 60 degrees. The front and sides of the vehicle are only 1 inch thick. 1 inch isn't a lot of armor and can't stop anything that is above a 30mm cannon. But as a light tank, speed and maneuverability are key, and more armor just means less speed and decreased range. Even with its thin armor, the vehicle still weighs 52,000 pounds, which is a lot for a light tank, but when it's put next to other American tanks at the time, like the M47 and the M103, it does look like the lighter of the bunch. Looking at the front of the tank, starting from the left, working our way to the right. To the left, you have your exhaust for your APU. Sometimes you'll see the exhaust mounted on the actual engine exhaust of the rear. Sometimes you'll see it up front like this. It's not really variant specific, but they'll just be like that. To the right of that, you have white lights for day or night driving, and then you'll also have IRs for driving at night with infrared vision. In the center, you have your driver's hatch, which is held in place by 2 stops over here. And then just in case those 2 stops don't hold it, there are another 2 stops right here just in front of the driver's hatch itself. And then as we move our way around to the side of the vehicle, you get a really good view of the tracks, which are composed of 75 single pin links. Now, the nice part about these track links is that the center guide, which is right here, it is an actual part of the track link. That way you don't have to stow a bunch of center guides all over your vehicle. Also with this track, you do have a rubber shoe pad, which you can see really well right here. It is bolted into the track itself. The downside of this is that if you don't periodically tighten them, you're bound to pull the vehicle in after a long day of driving only to notice that you're missing some rubber pads on either side. Ask me how I know. And another defining feature of the Walker is it does have torsion bar suspension. So you can see that you have 5 pairs of road wheels that go off of torsion bar suspension with pairs 1, 2, and the last one 5 on shock absorbers to help with the rough terrain a little bit more. Above your pairs of road wheels, you have 3 return rollers. 1 at the front and 2 at the rear, kind of like Chaffee running gear, but in reverse. Helps keep the track nice and tight. This little guy right here, this is your tensioning nut for your idler. So this front wheel is what we call the idler. And if you need to apply or release tension on a track, you would just turn this left or right to go up or down to release or apply tension for the track. And so the next part was where the Wegman smoke dischargers were, which is where this little hole is right up here. You can also tell that there's kind of a ground down square on that side of the turret. But basically, when you look at pictures of Walkers in West German service, which this is one, you'll see basically a bar with smoke grenade launchers come out of it. Below that, these 2 boxes right here, these are stowage boxes for either crew possessions or personal kit or vehicle parts. And in this one, you can see that we have a bunch of the track pads. Next to that, we have the exhaust that is above the drive sprocket. Now, the exhaust is mirrored on either side, so you'll basically have the exact same other exhaust, and you want to make sure you don't lean up against it when the vehicle is running because it is very hot and it will scorch you. You can boil water off of it. And then as we work our way to the rear of the vehicle, the first thing that you'll notice is this kind of hook right here. This is the travel lock for the main gun. So when the vehicle's in transit, what you can do is you can turn the entire turret around. You can have the barrel in here. That way the overall length of the vehicle is shorter, makes it easier when you're in transit or driving around. And then as we work our way down below, this is the box that would have the field phone. So if you're accompanying infantry, you can come up, you can open this up. Unfortunately, this one is missing the field phone, but you can grab the field phone. That way, you can talk to the tank commander, basically tell them, hey, you got a squad of guys behind you. Don't go in reverse, don't run us over. And then to close it, the exact same in reverse. And then next to that, this is the bar for the light cross. Now, this is how we know that this was a West German vehicle, because only the Germans run what we call the light cross, which is basically, it looks like a shield with a white cross on it. And what that is for is that is a convoy light. So when you're driving at night, low light environment, you don't want to have these massive lights going off. That'll be easier for the enemy to see. So you'll just have basically a tiny little bulb that'll be amplified by this white cross. And that's how we know that this vehicle is German. But those are another 2 cool things about this. Now above that, on the rear of the vehicle, on the deck, you can see the covers for the transmission dipstick, the engine oil dipstick, and then there's the fuel port, which is under the turret on the driver's side. Underneath the armored plates lies the heart of the vehicle, which is this. This is the Continental AOS-895, which is a 6-cylinder opposed boxer-style aviation engine. This engine is air-cooled and puts out 500 horsepower, which can propel the vehicle up to 45 miles an hour. Now, there were 2 main Continental engines for the Walker, the 895 AOS-3 and the AOS-5, with the difference being that the 3 was carbureted and the 5 was fuel injected. Now, this one here is carbureted. While this is a great engine, it is also the Achilles heel of the vehicle, as it was extremely fuel thirsty, and the 140 gallons of fuel that the vehicle could carry would only get you around 100 miles, give or take. This is not a phenomenal statistic when your tank's main role is reconnaissance. The engine would be paired to a CD500-3 transmission, which inputs 500 horsepower and transfers it into 3 speeds of low, high, and reverse, while also maintaining the steering and braking for the vehicle. With the power plant of the vehicle covered, let's jump up top to get a better view of the crew member stations. Now that we are standing on the deck of the vehicle, we can talk about the features of the top of the turret. Starting at the rear, working our way forward. At the rear, you have the stowage box that is bolted onto the back of the turret. This is a good spot to stow either personal equipment or, more tools. That way you don't have to actually have it, strapped to the side of the turret. And then straddling the stowage box on either side are 2 5-gallon jerry cans, which 10 gallons isn't a lot, but when reconnaissance is your thing, you need all the fuel you can get. In front of that, this circular dome right here, this is the armored cover for the ventilation blower. The ventilation blower is the system inside that keeps fresh air inside the turret for when the hatches are closed and you're fighting. Just in front of that, this is the commander's hatch. You can see it's basically just one sheet of armored metal. Unfortunately, the lock is missing, but it, of course, is mounted to the cupola, which has 5 vision blocks that go all the way around it, and also the commander's periscope. And then just in front of that, this is the gunner's periscope. So his optics are actually looking out of here. And then over on the left side, this is the hatch for the loader. And in order to actuate it, you just have one tab. It's right here. All you have to do is push forward, and then you can close the hatch. And then same for reverse. You just open it and then lock it in place. And then to the left of that, the loader does have one periscope. It is in a fixed position. It does not rotate, but it does allow the loader to at least get a little bit more visibility outside of the vehicle. So there are typically 3 spots on the Walker that you will put a pintle mount for a 50. One of them is right here. This is in between and behind the loader and the commander's hatch. It's not really in a good position because obviously if you're standing right here and the gun's back here, there's no way to access it without you, sitting on the back of the deck. So this is really only for transporting. This one doesn't have a pintle mount right here, but you'll see a lot of Walkers that'll have a pintle mount right here. It's an all right spot. Both the loader and the commander can use it, but neither can use it very well just because the loader has to reach in the commander's point of view and the commander has to reach into pretty much where the loader is. So in my opinion, the best spot for the M2 is right here to the right of the commander's seat, where you can pretty much use it either way. With the commander, he can move to the right and then also to the left. There are actually scratch marks here on top of the commander's mount where you can see where the can scratches it as it swings over. But you can't swing it over all the way to the left, but you do get a fair bit of field of fire to your right. Going inside. Starting off in the commander seat, the first thing you almost always instinctually do is take in the amount of room you have to work with. And I always hear people describe how the Bulldog is tight inside, and personally, I'd have to disagree with that. If you get into other post-World War II light tanks at the time, like say the French AMX-13, or a vehicle that replaced the M41 in some areas, like the British FE-101 Scorpion, then you will really feel cramped. Granted, the Bulldog is much larger than those vehicles, but I would even argue that you have more room in the Bulldog than other US tanks at the time, like the M46 or even the M47. I mean, I'm 6'2", and I can fully extend my legs on either side of the gunner instead of having to bury my kneecaps into the gunner's back. With that being said, starting from the top and working our way down, in front and around the commander are 5 vision slots and 1 M94 periscope, which together give the commander 360 degrees of vision. The M94 periscope houses both a regular periscope and an M20 or T35 gun sight. In this case, this is the M20. This is the same optic setup that the gunner uses, which means that if the commander sees a target to his 8 o'clock through his vision slots, he can override the gunner and bring the turret to bear on the target through his optic, which then either the gunner or the commander can take the shot. Speaking of override, the commander's override sticks are to his right side, where you'll see a joystick that is very easy to operate. To traverse the turret left or right, all you have to do is twist the controls to the desired location. The same applies for elevating the gun up or down. Then you have a trigger to fire either the coax or the main gun. Below the override controls is a spot for the commander's binoculars, and then between the gunner and the commander's seat is the turret lock attached to the turret ring. Speaking of commander's seat, he does only have the one seat, but it can go up or down. To the commander's immediate right is a comm box, and then behind him at the top is the release for the hatch for when the hatch is open and in the locked position. Next to that is the power handle for the ventilation system at the back of the turret. To the right of that, you have your stowage boxes for a periscope, a grease gun, and also the gunner's quadrant. To the right of that, and taking up the majority of the rear turret, is the very accessible AN-GRC radio set. As a light tank, scouting and reconnaissance is the main function. Engaging should only be done with targets of opportunity or if you have been engaged and you need to return fire before making a tactical retreat. Either way, it is the commander's job to stay on top of comms and report any findings, because shooting without backup can only get you so far. In front of the radios is a pad that kind of looks like a veil that is made from chainmail. This is just in case a spent case is ejected too hard and you don't want it to hit the radios before making its way down into the spent cartridge bin on the floor. Speaking of floor, the portion of the turret basket where the commander and the gunner sit is raised due to the gunner sitting on top of the ammunition stowage and the commander sitting on top of the electrical motor, and as you can see, the cover for the electrical motor is missing. With that being said, we'll move ahead into the gunner spot. Now, what is arguably the tightest position is the gunner spot. Even then, it's pretty generous with the amount of room you have. Starting at the top left is the ballistics drive, which is an early analog computer which is used to introduce super elevation by the varying degree of line of sight of the periscope to compensate for the trajectory of the projectile. In layman's terms, if you are loaded with an AP round and shooting at a target at 3,500 yards out, then you would turn this dial to 35 for AP and it would account for the trajectory of the drop, and you could just hold your crosshair on the target. Speaking of crosshair, the gunner uses the same M20 or T35 periscope, in this case this is the T35, that the commander does, and the crosshair for both is mil graduated. The optic is a 6-power system with a cross reticle that has both horizontal and vertical lines for range and leading targets. This is one of those cases where if it's not broken, don't fix it, because even today the Abrams reticle isn't too far off from this one. What I find interesting about this system is this little cover right here, which has suspiciously German numbering on it. You can flip this cover over and you'll find that it's a mirror. The proper term is reflector, but this mirror is aimed at the mirror behind the control arm, which is then pointed towards the ballistics unit. So that when you're aiming, you have both eyes open, your right eye is looking down the optic, and your left eye is actually looking at the ballistics unit through the reflector. That way, if you have to change targets and henceforth change your range, you don't have to take your eye off of the optic. There would normally be a secondary optic in the form of an M97 telescope, which is an 8-power optic for longer engagements. Working your way to the right is where the power traverse controls would normally be, but as you can see, the standard controls have been replaced by an aftermarket electrical box with these 4 buttons. I'm not sure if this was done for a movie production or what the occasion was, but the nice thing is that the previous owners did leave the original power traverse unit. Here you can see the switch to turn it on or off, and then you can traverse the turret by twisting the handle left or right. The handle also has a trigger on it to fire the main gun or the coax. The fire control box is to the right of the power traverse box with 3 switches, left for the 76mm, middle for the 30 cal machine gun, and then right for elevation. By means of these switches, the 76mm gun and coax 30 cal can be fired either singly or simultaneously. Your manual traverse is found under that on the turret ring, where you can turn left to go left and right to go right. Elevation and depression are performed by rotating this hydraulic pump, which is similar to the system that is found on the M26 Pershing. There is also a trigger on the handle to fire either the main gun or the coax. It is worth pointing out that this gun does not have a stabilizer on it, but the elevation does feel light. Connected to the hand pump is a line running to the right side of the gunner's seat, where you will find the hydraulic pump booster. This pump replenishes the oil in the elevation system, making the elevation or depression of the gun an easier process. Above the hand pump is the gunner's azimuth indicator for your bearings, and then shifting your way behind that is the controls for the backrest. You push this button in and the backrest comes down. It's pretty comfortable and helps you sit pretty upright. If you need to put it back into place, you can just press this button again and then hit the rest, and it goes up pretty easily, which is nice in case you need to leave your station in a hurry. We're going to use it now to move to the loader's position. Now for the spot with the most room. Even when the vehicle is loaded to bear, the loader's position still feels like you have plenty of room to work with. Starting at the front, you have the coax machine gun and the ammo bin for it. The coax machine gun is the standard 1919 A4E1, and it's in a nice close spot. It's not too far forward into the turret to reload and work on. And then to the left of that, you have your ammo bin, which is very easy to open and refill your coax ammo. On board, you would carry 5,000 rounds of 30 cal for the coax, some of which you would carry inside on the turret wall to the left, which unfortunately the mounts have been missing for some time. Also in front on the left is the ready rack, which would stow 11 rounds for the main gun, with another 13 rounds below the main gun itself. The rest of the ammunition would be stowed next to the driver, where there'd be another 33 rounds. You do have to spin the turret to access it, but having another 24 rounds around the loader is a nice amount to have. The M32 cannon is the centerpiece of the turret, or the T91E3 in this case. The main gun can fire a wide range of ammunition, everything from AP, HE, HVAP, armor-piercing fin-stabilized discarding sabot, and even canister. While I've never fired an HVAP round, I have been told by several ex-M41 crew members that HVAP just shakes the hell out of the turret and is rather unpleasant after a couple shots. Just in front, you can see the breech operating lever with the recoil guard around it and to the right. The breech is a vertical sliding breech block, which this one has unfortunately been welded in place. This is just a personal preference of mine, but I'm not really a big fan of a vertical breech block when you're pulling around from in front of you. I've always liked a horizontal breech block for that. I do really like a vertical breech block for, say, a system like the M48, the M60, or even the Abrams, where you're pulling rounds from behind you and you can flip them, manipulate them a little bit easier before throwing the rounds in the gun. It's just a total personal preference thing. Other than that, the only other personal gripe I have about the loader station is the seat. The seat is pretty far down, so I've always found it easier to just pretty much kick it out of the way, and you have a little bit more room to work with. Around the turret, you do have a periscope to your front and also 2 lights on the roof, one above the gun and then one behind you next to the radio, which does a good job of lighting up the interior. Personally, I believe the loader's position is really well laid out, but we still have one more spot to check out, so let's slide forward to the driver's position. The driver's position is interesting, as with the M47, it would be one of the last US tanks to have the driver's position to the left of the vehicle. Inside, you have 3 periscopes to your front and a 4th just looking over your left shoulder, which isn't super helpful, but it is nice that it's there. You could also mount an M19 infrared periscope in the driver's hatch. That way you can drive at night with your IR lights on, which personally, driving this thing at night under night vision is on another level of cool. For steering, you have a steering bar just below your periscope that has 2 handles that come down at a 90-degree angle. I like to hold out as far as possible for more leverage and to make smoother turns. On the left side of that, you have a hand throttle control knob, and then under that you have your tachometer and then a speedometer under that, although I've never seen a speedometer work. On the left side of the vehicle, you have the ability to raise or lower the seat as well as move it to the front or the rear. You can also drop the seat to the side, that way you can have more room to use the escape hatch, which is located just under your seat. Back to the front, under your steering crossbar, you have a box for your M19 periscope, and then under that, you have a brake pedal on the left and a gas pedal on the right, and then your fuel primer is in between them. On the bottom right, you have your range selector control for neutral park, neutral steer, low, high, and reverse. Now this is a super easy system to use and train people on. You just press on the brake, pull on the lever in the middle, and then you put the lever in the desired position you want to be in, and off you go. Above that, the driver has controls for his heater and the APU. Directly to the right of his shoulder, he has the instrument panel for his lights, master power, and his controls for starting and shutting off the vehicle. And then above your instrument panel is a receptacle for a slave cable because they can never put it in a convenient spot for how heavy the cable is. Above that is the control for the hatch to swing it over and lock it down. Now that we've seen the inside, it's time to bring the M41 to life. Let's take it for a spin.
All right, so before we fire it up, we just need to make sure that the environment around us is safe. We want to make sure that there's nothing behind us, because once we fire this thing up, it's going to be a little bit hard to hear anything, and we're definitely not going to feel anything if we run it over. So with that being said, got my foot on the brake pedal, and then the vehicle, just making sure it's in neutral. Now, granted, the vehicle will not start if it's not neutral, but it's just good practice. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to flip the master power to the on position, and then we're going to flip magnetos over to both. And now all we have to do is hold in the booster and the starter till the vehicle fires up. Alright, now that the vehicle is fired up, we're just going to help her warm up, so we're going to keep the RPM right around 1,000. And then once we're sure that she's warmed up, we'll let her dip down right between 6 to 8 is right where we want her. To start driving, the first thing we're going to do, we're going to put our foot on the brake pedal, then we're going to bring our shifter. We're going to put the vehicle down into low. We're going to come off the brake. We're going to give her a little gas. Now, low is really only good for, say, starting the vehicle, rough terrain. It's generally going below, say, 12 to 15 miles an hour. If you know you're going to get to a spot where you're going to go, say, flat out through a field or on a convoy, we're going to go for a while, you know you're going to be going above 15 miles an hour. Once you get to a spot where your RPMs get pretty high, then all you have to do to bring her high is just crank the shifter down. You don't need to stop the vehicle or anything. And that's pretty much it. Now, the one thing that you do want to be aware of is your turning radius when the vehicle's in low versus when it's in high. So when the vehicle's in low, your turning radius is 18 feet. That's the tightest you can make a turn. However, when you push the vehicle into high, the tightest you can make a turn is 55 feet. So you want to make sure that whatever turn is in front of you, that you want to be in the right gear, because you don't want to make, say, a a 30-foot turn while going 45 miles an hour, because, well, let me tell you, nothing good's going to come out of that. Now, talking about steering, the steering is accomplished with the steering bar that has the two sticks that come down on either side. Now, you want to reach out and grab those as far as possible to give yourself as much leverage as you need. And if you want to make a right turn, all you need to do is you just pull back on the right stick while you push ahead with the left. And then if you want to make a left turn, well, you just do the opposite. You pull back on the left and you push ahead with the right. And then you only have two pedals. You have a brake pedal on your left-hand side, and then you have a really big gas pedal on your right. And those are pretty self-explanatory. However, you do want to keep a foot ready on pretty much each pedal. That way, in case you need to stop, you'll stop. That way you don't slam 52,000 pounds of Cadillac steel into something you go to tend to. But the Walker is handling these turns extraordinarily well. The only thing is you can tell that the vehicle wants to get a little bit more speed out of these straightaways, but since this isn't really a full-size track, well, we don't want to cause any accidents, so we're not going to go at full speed. But it definitely does give you the idea of how fast and simple this thing is. It is very easy to make turns, it's very easy to stop. And the torsion-bar suspension on this thing, it handles second to none. The only downside about it is the vehicle's a little bit shorter, so torsion-bar suspension will handle on something better, like say on a Leopard or an M60 where the vehicle is longer. But even then, this thing is a joy to drive, and it's really smooth, even when you're going above 35 miles an hour. We'll do one more lap, and then we'll bring her in to let her cool on down. Because the other thing about the Walker is they're extraordinarily fuel thirsty. As we talked about earlier, you got 140 gallons of gas on this vehicle. But even then, your range is only 100 miles. That's not good for a reconnaissance vehicle, especially when you go far out such a ways, you gotta come back. Unless you plan on stopping and refueling inside the combat zone, which I would not advise for how flammable gasoline is. Of course, as the years would go by and other countries would use the Walker, some would alter their vehicles to diesel engines. In fact, a lot of the Walkers that are still in service, they do have those diesels, but the U.S. decided that the gasoline engine, no, it's not for them. So the Walker would be replaced by the Sheridan, which had a little bit more firepower capabilities with the Shillelagh missile, but in my opinion, the high-velocity 76. It's not the best, but it's not bad. I certainly wouldn't be shot by it. Well, with that being said, we're going to go ahead and bring her to a close, see how the brake pedal is. The vehicle stops pretty fast. It's not the best brake pedal, but it'll definitely do.
As you can see, the Walker is a very simple machine to crew and operate, which is one of the reasons why so many were able to find a home in former militaries. At the time of recording this video in 2025, some of those vehicles still serve their country well, albeit with a lot of upgrades and modifications. Even though the vehicle was built heavier than intended and its range shorter than anticipated, the M41 proved to be a great platform for other vehicles, like the M42 Duster, which is a self-propelled anti-aircraft platform with dual 40mm Bofors, and also the M44 self-propelled 105 howitzer, and finally the M75 armored personnel carrier, all of which can be seen here at the National Museum of Military Vehicles. If you like this kind of content and wish to see more of it, be sure to let us know in the comments.